Patriotism is not dead.
I like how you call it a bird.
Serving the Vietnam generation is a great privilege for me.
You don't leave a fallen comrade behind on the battlefield. Why would we leave him behind on the sidewalk?
What keeps you going?
Oh boy.
We were taught to leave things better than we found them.
Let the chips fall where they may.
A soldier's duty is never done.
March 29th is National Vietnam War Veterans Day. So we are travelling from DC to South Carolina to LA and Georgia to see Vietnam War veterans who, more than 50 years after that war ended, continue to serve today in inspiring ways. Honour, patriotism and audacity first sent them onto the battlefield to defend our freedoms. And despite many years and many challenges, they still haven't lost that spirit.
The patrol was sweeping through an overgrown rubber plantation. Specialist Barclay's flank squad was soon receiving intensive claymore, mine, rocket, small arms, and automatic weapons fire. He immediately retaliated with effective rifle fire. As he was moving to the perimeter, he heard a cry for help from a wounded comrade. With complete disregard for his personal safety, he returned to his original position to aid the casualty. He was dragging the wounded man to cover when he was mortally wounded by enemy fire. R.I.P.
Every day along this wall, people leave stories. If you can imagine, every single name on this wall has a story behind it. More than 58,000 of them.
And even now, every day, people leave reminders like this letter and medals to be added to their legacy.
And we're actually very fortunate that we are able to speak to surviving vets who are still able to tell us their story.
Right on the edge of the beautiful Charleston Harbor in South Carolina is Patriots Point Naval and Maritime Museum.
There are many draw cards that bring people here from all across the nation, but what we're here to see today is the Vietnam experience.
I'd heard that the Vietnam experience is a realistic 2.5-acre US Marine Corps firebase, just like what it would have been in the war. But I wondered how realistic it actually would be.
This place is alive still. It's living history. It's setting an example and teaching the country to honor their past.
War veterans come into this place, and I've watched them break out in tears. I've watched them start to shake their head, turn around and leave. I've watched them go, wow, this is just like it was. And I've had them say, we never had one of those.
We were lucky to have two veterans, Ralph Stoney Bates and Thom as our tour guides.
We're about to cross the bridge to go inside, and I'm already starting to hear the noise of what it might have been like. What is that, a helicopter?
It's a helicopter taking off or landing.
Insect noises?
Yes, birds, a tiger occasionally. That's next to the largest bird that we had in Vietnam.
I like how you call it a bird.
It continuously moved down the runway, and it was weaving from left and right.
Why did it have to keep moving?
Because it would be a target for the enemy if it was still. So you had to jump off, or if you were leaving, you had to jump on before it left. They use these to haul ammunition, to haul wounded, to haul dead. A Marine can be on the ground, crawling, driving.
How would that work?
This would drop down to this position, and here's his gears right here, and his brakes. So he could drive this vehicle below the danger line.
Yeah. Where's the danger line?
Your head
getting shot at.
Yeah, your head exposed. People are scared. They're really scared. It's hard to breathe. It's hard to slow your heart down. And the more people can make light of your surroundings, the more comfortable you begin to feel. That's a 40 millimeter dual purpose rifle right there.
And what's coming out of the end of that?
High explosive, and about this big around, about that long, which could travel up to 3 miles.
So you got one and then another going on at the same time.
Yeah,
So,
they're left and right constantly.
so that would be shooting a lot.
Yes, and that's where they get the dragon's breath, the flame coming out the front.
While I was truly impressed by the exhibit, I wanted to know what veterans would think was missing.
The thing that's missing here